All right. So this webinar is all about how to feel less anxious, particularly right now when we're going through the coronavirus pandemic. And what I want to offer you is that there is no right way to experience the situation that we're in. So if you're feeling anxious or frustrated or overwhelmed or fine, whatever your experience is fine, is all right, is the experience that you're having. So there's no right way to experience it. And what I will offer is that you get to decide how you want to experience it. And so really the bottom line message from this webinar is that anxiety is optional. You don't have to feel intense anxiety while we're going through this if you don't want to. There are ways to experience what we're experiencing and not feel panicked and overwhelmed and anxious. And I'm not saying this to say that you shouldn't feel anxious, but I'm saying it so you know that it is in your control and there are things you can do to help yourself feel less of it. So, anxiety is optional, and this is important because it means we have control here. And so, in this webinar, I'm going to be sharing a lot of different tools. And really, what I've done is I've boiled it down to 5 specific tools. And these tools are ones that I've used on myself and on clients. So, I am a life coach. I work with people, particularly with self confidence and managing anxiety in the workplace and also just in life. Okay, so the first tool that I want to share with you around how to feel less anxious is to depower the anxiety by processing it in your body. Let me go ahead and move that so you can see the screen a little bit better. So what this means is when we experience anxiety in our bodies, a lot of times it feels like it can take over. And so the first thing I want to offer you is just to breathe. So we start here because we want to get in our bodies first before we do some of the more cognitive type of tools. So this technique was developed by a Navy SEAL, and it's used to help depressurize situations and to get rid of some of that anxiety and stress in the moment. I'll talk about the science behind it in a minute, but let's first just do this together. So it's the 4-4-4-4 technique. So you're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. And usually you'll repeat this several times. So let's just take a moment, do that together now just to see what it feels like. All right. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So what that does is it allows us to reoxygenate our blood. Because when our bodies go into fight or flight, which is what happens when we're feeling anxious, our body thinks we're going to die. And so it usually some form of that thought is what's happening. And so we get in a panic. And when our bodies get in a panic and go into that fight or flight or freeze mode, it shunts the oxygen away from the extremities in our bodies. So our hands, our feet, our heads, so that it can reconcentrate it inward in areas that help us to run away from danger. But what that means is you don't get the oxygen to your brain or the blood to your brain, and so it makes it harder to think. So if you've ever been one to like blank out before an important conversation or anything like that, this is probably what's happened. Or if you feel like you can't think clearly under pressure, this is probably what's happened. So by just taking a moment to slow down and breathe, it reoxygenates that blood so that you can again think clearly. So this technique is one to use any moment where well, really, actually, anytime. I mean, I use it preventatively as well as when I'm in the thick of the anxiety. So, when it feels like you can't think straight and some of the other tools don't feel accessible to you, I would start here with this one. And it's almost like our breath is the connection between our physiological body and our mental body. Because when you take that breath, you're connecting the two and allowing yourself to think a little more clearly again. Okay, and so what else can we do to help ourselves kind of take the power back and not feel in control of anxiety? So this one is a part of the same tool, and it really gets down to knowing what anxiety is. So I want you to take a moment and think about that question for yourself. What is anxiety? What is that like? What does it feel like? And what is it? And really, what anxiety is it's a feeling. It's this feeling that we have in our bodies. And so then our next natural question becomes, well, what is a feeling? And a feeling is a vibration or it's chemicals released in your body. And so we want to know how this happens, right? So we're feeling anxious and we know what that feels like. And we could even take a moment now to think about what that feels like. So for me, it's this tingly in my cheeks. It's my shallow breath, like I feel it shallow in my chest. Sometimes it's almost like my hands feel almost a little bit numb or clammy. And it's like this gentle heat that's in the cheeks and in the chest for me as well. So just kind of take a moment there. What is anxiety like for you? What does it feel like? Okay. So that is what anxiety feels like. And what it is a feeling and that vibration in our bodies. How does that happen? Because it doesn't just like pop up. It can feel like that, but it's coming from somewhere. And so let's walk through that process right now so we can know our points of impact for how we can help lessen it. So what we have is we're taking in inputs in the world. So, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, experience, our past programming, the past situations we've been in, all of those we can think of as inputs, things that we are taking in each moment. And I'm talking about this now as it relates to coronavirus because that is where that fits in. The coronavirus is a situation out there. It's a circumstance that we're experiencing out there. And then we take it in the sense that we notice it and then we have thoughts about it and a physiological response from those thoughts and from what we're taking in. And so what we're talking about here is we want to know how to process that, how to help ourselves take back control. And the way we can see that is in knowing that what we're experiencing in that feeling is physiological. It's chemicals released in our bodies. And so what happens is we all were born with some type of chemical baseline. Different neurotransmitters and hormones come together within us when we're experiencing some type of situation that are ones that tend to make us feel anxious. And so we all have different chemical baselines. So some of us were born with different baselines than others. And so some of us might have a different threshold for feeling that anxiety. And so what we want to do though is notice that even though you might be born with a certain baseline for how much you tend to experience anxiety, we can still control a lot of our experience with anxiety and how intense it is. And so Dr. Bruce Lipton in his book Biology of Belief even talks about how the way we think influences our cells and how our genes are expressed at the molecular level, which means literally how you believe and what you think can influence the way your genes themselves are expressed, which means influence that baseline because it's influencing the way that you're taking in the different chemicals and neurotransmitters within you. And so all of that to say that you have a lot more control than you may think around the physiology behind your anxiety. And so what that shows us is that we are in so much more control than we realize. And it also helps us to see how we can influence it by what we're thinking. And there's also things we can do as well. And so for this specific tool, we talked about breathing. That's a way to reoxygenate that blood. That's a way to get yourself able to think more clearly so that you can think in a different way to influence that physiology. So that is key here. And another thing too is you want to let out some of that energy, some of that vibration within you. And so a feeling is that pent up energy. That's all it is. Kind of makes it feel a little more harmless. We tend to think when we have anxiety, it means something's gone wrong. But all it means is we have some energy flowing through us because of what we're thinking. That's all that's happened. It's our thoughts causing that energy that we feel, and then we label it anxiety. And so, one thing that I like to do is I kind of borrow from Taylor Swift here and I shake it off because it's this energy within you. And if you're somebody who tends to clench your jaw a lot, or maybe you grit your teeth, or you have that pit in your stomach, it's because you're holding on to that anxiety tightly. So we want to just kind of shake it off. Or if you're a Grey's Anatomy fan, you might dance it out like they do in the show, or even run it out. So find ways, maybe it's jumping jacks in your house if you're not going outside right now, but find ways to just let the energy release within you. And I'm going like this because it's kind of like shaking it off. Like if you have a dog, or you've ever seen a dog that's just gotten out of the water, what do? Well, they shake off all of the droplets on their body. So think about anxiety and that energy as just little droplets of water all around you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just water on the skin, but you want to dry off. And so you just kind of shake it all off as a means to help release it. And so that's a very physical way to get rid of the anxiety. Now, let's talk about something a little more specific to the coronavirus with this, because those techniques will help. But I want to help us focus a little more on the specific situation that we're in now. And the way to do that is to neutralize the virus so that we can see our own power within it. So we want to neutralize the virus. Earlier in the previous tool, we were talking about how to kind of depower, neutralize anxiety. There's nothing wrong with anxiety. It's just that feeling in our body. Now we're going to neutralize the virus itself. And what I mean by that is if this is how our feelings happen, so anxiety is coming because we're taking in inputs, and then we're having thoughts and feelings about them, or thoughts and physiology from that about them. What that means is the actual virus itself is neutral. It's just the situation we're experiencing in the world. Now, I might get some pushback on this, but I really invite you to just consider that this is or could be true. Because if the virus itself, the pandemic that we're in itself, is just the situation, it's not good or bad, it just is, it takes away some of the power. Because the reason we feel anxiety is not because of the situation itself, but because of our thoughts about it. Thoughts like, I can't handle this, everything's on hold, it's all up in the air, and I have no idea what's going on. Whatever that thought is for you, or thoughts, often there's a lot of thoughts in there, that is where the anxiety is coming from. The virus itself isn't causing it. Now, that is the situation that's triggering these thoughts, but it doesn't mean you have to think about it in this way. You can if you want to, but just know that those thoughts themselves are causing the anxiety within you. So then what do we do? How do we help ourselves if these are the thoughts that we're having? Well, we want to get clear on what the facts are versus the thoughts. And I like to think about this like the facts are the statistics behind it, the data. And the thoughts are the headlines. So if you think about the news, you have the different data points, and then you have the title of the news article, or the main headline that they put at the bottom of the banner if you're watching TV and you're watching the news. So our thoughts are like those headlines, and the facts are just what is. They're neutral. You have thoughts about those facts that causes your anxiety. And so what we want to do is we want to get really clear on those facts versus the headlines and what we're making it mean. So we want to separate it out. And so this is an activity you can do with yourself when you notice your brain is kind of spinning out. You want to ask yourself, wait a minute, what are the facts here? And that's often things like it's the number of cases. So, how many have been diagnosed in my area, or how many have died from this, or where we're at in the world, who's experiencing this? It's the legal mandates, as in if there's a stay home order in your area, if there's new laws about rent and whether or not you can evict people. Those laws are just the facts. You have thoughts about those laws, but not everyone would have the same thoughts. So you might think, oh, what a great thing that everyone is staying home right now. What a great thing that that law is out there because it's allowing us to stay healthier. And I'm not saying this law is out there. There are some areas though where it has been mandated. So for instance, I live in San Diego and we are under a safer at home is I think what it's called order where legally we can't leave our house unless it's for essential things or to go outside and get exercise, but not to go to events or anything like that. And so some of the clients I've worked with have felt really anxious about that because they feel trapped. Their thought is, I'm trapped, I can't leave, this isn't fair, I shouldn't be experiencing that. While other people are thinking, this is great. This is a way for us to help stop the spread of the virus. This is exactly what we need to be doing. And so they feel secure and relief from it. The same exact circumstance, that law or that order, very different thoughts about it, and so very different emotions. So we want to get to know what the fact is so we can then separate that from our thoughts. Another fact is the amount of supplies. So then we ask ourselves, what are our headlines? So I just gave an example of a fact and then some of the different headlines you might have around it. Now, it could be we're all going to die. It could be this is getting real. It could be I don't know if we have enough. And these are all headlines that probably create some sort of anxiety within you. And I'm only sharing these ones because these are the ones that tend to be what I hear when clients or myself, when my brain's going, and tends to be the reason I feel anxious. So then you want to slow down and ask yourself, okay, what is the actual fact here? Well, let's just take the first one. It's the number of cases. And our thought is, or was, we are all going to die. But we don't have to think that. There's other ways that might be more useful for us to take this in. Because here's the thing, people die every day. And it's just right now with this virus, we're all on high alert. And so we're all focusing on all of the deaths. If we spent all of life focusing on all of the people that are dying, all of the sicknesses out there, all of the car crashes that happen, all of the diseases that are occurring, we'd be feeling anxious in every moment of every day all the time. But right now, the whole world is hyper focused on this one situation, this one virus. And what it's actually doing is creating a virus in our minds, a sickness in our head, because we're all thinking about this. So there's really two viruses happening right now. The one out there, the coronavirus, the physical virus, and then the virus we create in our heads because of the headlines we have about it, because of the way we're thinking about it. So just ask yourself, is this the headline that I want to have? Because we could think people do die every day. We could think death has always been a part of it. Most of us won't die from this. Some of us will, some of us won't. I'm healthy right now. Another example, we'll just kind of take these through, is that headline of this is getting real when you think about the amount of supplies, whether it's your own supplies or supplies at the hospitals. And you could know, hey, this is getting real, and that's okay. That's where we're at right now. This is what it is. It could be that that's just what it is. And that's what's happening right now. Now, I see here too, what you're all looking at is this idea of the legal mandates. So I've said supplies earlier, I apologize, but what we're talking about is the legal mandates, and these laws are here to protect us. That's what's happening. And we kind of walked through this example earlier. How do you want to think about those laws in a way that helps you, in a way that serves you? Similarly with the amount of supplies, which could be, I don't know if we have enough, which could also be true. You literally don't know if you have enough. So the fact could be, this is the amount of supplies, and your thought that feels true is, I don't know if we have enough. So ask yourself, how does that thought feel? When I think, I don't know if we have enough, do you feel panicked or do you feel curious? Because if the feeling creates a response in you that doesn't help you to think through things, then ask yourself, what would? We'll figure this out. Right now, we're okay. There's a way to make this work. And here's the thing. We either figure it out or we don't. That's just what it is. We'll figure it out or we won't. And either way, it is the reality of it. It's just life. And we can't argue with reality because it's just the truth of it. The reality is we're in a pandemic. There's a certain amount of supplies. And maybe we figure it out and maybe we don't. But that is the situation we're in, and we can make it mean what we want. It just is what it is. It doesn't have to be scary or dangerous unless we take it to that place. So, how can we help ourselves think about this in a way that's more helpful? How can we help ourselves neutralize how we're thinking? Well, questions are a great way. So, you want to use questions with yourself to help get rid of the headlines. So, if you notice the anxiety start to come up, you want to ask yourself first, what are the headlines I'm experiencing? And then, second, okay, what questions can I ask myself to help myself through this? And so I've given some examples here, which is, if I knew I could figure this out, what would I do? Could there be another way to look at this? What might someone else be thinking about this? How might someone else be seeing this? And one of my coach colleagues, I don't recall the exact quote, but she's a physician and she was sharing, this is what it is and we can get through it. And if you think about this, there have been other pandemics in the past where people might have thought, this is the end, this is it, but we always got through it. We continue on. And if we don't get through it, then we weren't meant to. I think what happens here is we often think we have this illusion of control that this pandemic is bringing out to show us what it is we truly do and don't control. And one thing, though, that you do control are your headlines in your head. So asking yourself these questions will help you to take that control back. So if you knew you could figure it out, what would you do? Just play with that. What would you do? Is there another way to look at this? Or how do I want to feel right now? And what would I need to think to feel that? So if you are feeling anxiety and you're thinking, you know what, this is not what I want to feel right now, what would allow you to feel differently? You might say, well, the pandemic to end. But then ask yourself, okay, what would I be thinking if this were over? I'd be thinking, it's all right now. We're okay. Okay. So then take those thoughts and see if you can believe them now. Because it is all right. We're okay. We're alive in this moment. We're breathing air in this moment. We're here in this moment, in this exact moment, not tomorrow, not the next day. You have what you need. You're okay right now. And that doesn't mean you then figure out what to do going forward, but it does allow you to take some of the anxiety out of it so you can feel calmer and think from that place. And that kind of gets at the last question here, which is, what if nothing is going wrong? How would I be thinking then? And then using that to help yourself get in that mindset now. Now, if you want help with this, I will be giving you my email at the end here. Feel free to send me questions if they're coming up throughout the week, if they're not coming up now, and I'm happy to answer them and do some email coaching that way to offer you some support. Okay, now let's move on to a next tool. This is how to focus your mind's timeline on purpose, which is kind of a funny way to say that. So let's kind of use some pictures here to visualize what we mean. So here you are, that's you, in this current moment, and you're having thoughts. And you might be having thoughts that are focused on specific areas in time. So for instance, a lot of people are going to the past and they're thinking about, oh gosh, the last time so-and-so was sick, they barely got through it. And they're going through all of that, or they're thinking about how they don't know if they can get through it now because of some situation that happened in the past. People are also going to this week, next week, 2 to 3 months from now, and they're thinking about just the next 2 to 3 months as if that's the entirety of the rest of life. Everything in their mind is consumed not with the current exact moment, but with the next 2 to 3 months. Thoughts like, I don't know if I can do this, getting trapped with my family or my children, this is too much, I can't take this. And they're thinking all about just the next 2 to 3 months or the past. And they're thinking about it in a way that causes much more stress. And what I'd invite for you to do is to actually zoom out a bit and say, okay, sure, I'm having these thoughts and this experience right now about the next 2 to 3 months. But what about the next 2 to 5 years? Like, let's zoom out. We've zoomed in so far on the current time. It's like all consuming. It's like the only thing there is the next 2 to 3 months. But we forget to think about, okay, what about a year from now? 5 years from now? Yeah, so this event might be something that changes how we show up or who we are. But life could go on. There's more beyond the next 2 to 3 months. And if you think about it, we also don't know if there's more beyond the next 2 to 3 months, but we've never known. But if you think about the you from 5 months ago, you weren't hyper focused and vigilant on the next 2 to 3 months, wondering or not if you were going to live or die, but you could have died at any moment. And so now we're so focused on it in this way that isn't helping. So what I invite you to do is to zoom out to the next 2 to 5 years, but do it in a way that's helpful, because I think you could also think the economy is going to tank. So a year from now, who knows, everything, I might be on the street, I might blah, blah, blah. And you're going on, worst case scenario, and seeing the rest of your life in this doomsday place. So if you're going to zoom out to the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and it isn't offering you any relief, then what I recommend is you focus on the present. And so what this means is try zooming out to 2 to 5 years. If you just feel more anxiety because of how you're thinking, then pull yourself back in and focus just on now. I talked about this a little bit earlier, and so I'm going to reiterate it here. It's not focusing on the next hour. It's focusing on right now. This is especially helpful if you experience panic, whether it's panic about symptoms that you might physically be experiencing, or if it's panic about life in general, or if it's panic because you can't sleep because of what's happening. Refocus on right now. In this moment, I'm okay. In this moment, I'm breathing. In this moment, I have what I need. Nothing's gone wrong in this exact moment. I'm here. And that's the only moment that we really have. So just reminding yourself of that, refocusing there can help you out. And then from that place might be the opportunity to game plan forward. And so I'm not saying never think about tomorrow, but don't think about tomorrow from this place of anxiety. First, center and ground yourself by focusing on the now, and then say, okay, I'm okay now. I can figure this out. And intentionally plan how you want to think about the next 2 to 3 months. Okay, if this is what it is, this is just the experience we're in. It's not good or bad. It just is what is happening. How do I want to approach it? If the stock continues to go down, and that's my experience, what will I do? How can I help myself through it? Put on a problem solver hat. Imagine that everything is figure outable and help yourself from that approach. And you might be saying, yes, but I don't know if I can figure it out. Here's the thing. If you think you don't know if you can figure it out and you focus on that thought, you just create more anxiety, which stops you from being able to think clearly, which means you won't figure it out. But if you can think, okay, I can figure this out. There could be a way to figure it out. I might be able to come up with a solution here. I might be able to survive this. Whatever thought gives you a little bit of relief, from that place of more relief, more ease, more calm, think about how you'll be able to think from that headspace and the types of solutions you'll be able to come up with. And so this is the way you can help yourself through it. What sometimes happens is when I say that, people then get anxiety about their anxiety. They think, I'm feeling anxious, now I won't be able to think clearly, and I won't be able to help myself, and I'm going to screw myself over. So they get anxious and frustrated at themselves for the anxiety and then just create more anxiety. So if that's you, then it's the perfect opportunity to let it be okay to feel anxious. All you're experiencing is an emotion in your body. It's harmless. It's just an emotion. So let yourself breathe through it and experience it and say, okay, this is the moment in time where I'm feeling anxiety. That's all that's happening. Chemicals are being released because of what I'm thinking. That's it. I can get through this. And the way our bodies work is we tend to think a thought that creates anxiety and it releases chemicals within us. But those chemicals don't last forever. They last for about 15 minutes. Unless you think another thought that creates more anxiety, so then you kind of start the timer over, which is fine. It's just 15 minutes. You can handle 15 minutes of anything. You know you can handle it, and you just think about it each minute at a time. In this minute, this is how I feel, and that's okay. Notice the anxiety in your body and describe it to yourself in your body, almost like you're a scientist taking notes on an experiment. And the experiment is what you feel in your body. So you're like, how interesting. My heart's beating faster. Okay. My fingers tingle. But don't forget about the other facts like I'm breathing. My chest is expanding. Okay. I can see, I can hear, I can smell. Like, don't forget the other facts too, as you're kind of describing that experience in the moment. All right. So that's how you can focus your mind's timeline on purpose and in a way that helps you, and how you can then use that to game plan by getting to that grounded, centered place first. Now, let's talk about this other idea, which is focusing your mind on what you can control. So we did that a little bit with the timeline, but let's now talk about it from the place of control. So there's a lot that we can control and there's a lot that we can't control. But what's happening now is a lot of us are focusing on what we can't control. So I've listed off some of those things because sometimes our mind gets confused. It thinks if we focus on something, then we're helping. Like sometimes we think worry is productive because we're like, well, I can't do anything, but I can worry about it. Okay, so let's worry about it as if it's helping. But I'd invite you to consider whether it really is, because it probably isn't. So what can't we control? You and I probably all know this, but sometimes it helps to hear it again, to remind our mind, that kind of primitive part of our brain that likes to react and spin out. So So here we go, brain. We can't control the entire pandemic. Even if we're thinking about it a lot, we can't control it. We can't control if others get sick. Some people might be thinking they can. And I can hear my brain try to trick me up on this too. We think we can literally control if others get sick or if we get sick. And here's the thing, all we can control is what we do, and we'll get there in a minute, and how we think and who we hang out with. But we don't know if that will actually stop us from getting sick. So you might be someone who's social distancing. You're in your house, self-quarantine, you're not talking to anyone, and you're not really seeing anyone, and you're just there in your house by yourself. But you might still get sick. And the loved one you're concerned about, so you're not seeing them, might still get sick. Or you could be out and about, hugging everyone, sharing drinks, doing whatever, and not get sick. We just don't know. We can't actually control that. And sometimes we think we can. So just remind yourself that you literally can't control whether or not you get sick. Now, if that sends you to a panic, know that there are pieces you can control, and we're going to get there in a minute. But it helps us to see, wait a minute, I can't actually control if others get sick. Sometimes, and I've noticed this with my mind a lot, I keep thinking about my parents, and I keep worrying about them and what this means for them. And it's like, I think if I worry about them, I'm doing my part. Like as if I have some control by thinking about it, it makes a difference. And I just keep reminding myself, oh, there's my brain again, thinking it can control something it can't. Me worrying about them is like my brain trying to trick me into thinking this is going to help and this is productive, and maybe I'll come up with some solution I hadn't thought of. But from worry, you won't. It just creates more worry and anxiety and more of the mind virus. So we also can't control what laws are passed. We can't control what others do or think or focus on. We may think that our kids should leave wherever they're at to come with us. I was coaching a client on this earlier. They had a vacation home in another area of the state, and they really wanted their kids who lived in an area that's pretty affected to come to the other area of the state. And they were really frustrated because they felt like their kids were being dismissive of them. She just kept saying, my kids are being dismissive of me. They're not hearing me. They're not hearing what I need and what I think would be helpful for them. But those are just her thoughts. Meanwhile, her kids, where they were at in their area, were thinking, it's not that bad. I'm fine. Nothing's gone wrong. I'll be okay. If it gets bad enough, I'll leave. And so the mom in this moment was trying to control her kids' actions and just getting really frustrated because you literally can't. You can't say enough to convince somebody to do something. All you are is their situation. So like their input that they take in, and then they choose what they think about it. They could think, oh, I agree, you're so right. Or they could think you're crazy, or they could think, I'm not going to do that. They can think whatever they want. So this doesn't mean you can't still make requests or suggestions to loved ones. Of course you can. But just don't tie your own emotional well-being into their response. If you say, hey, I really think that you should come with me and quarantine here with me where I'm at, and they say no, if you get all anxious about it, it's not because they said no. It's because you think they should have said yes. It's because of what you're thinking about them, what you think they should or shouldn't do. But the truth is, we actually don't know what somebody else should or shouldn't do. Like, the universe might have an idea of what we're supposed to do. If you believe in God, God might have an idea of what we're supposed to do. But there's no actual right or wrong here. What you choose is what you're supposed to do because it's what you're doing. Just like what your kids or loved ones do is what they're supposed to do because it's what they're doing. And that's it. If you focus so much so on them and what they should do or should think or should be not doing, it just makes you feel worse and it doesn't do anything for them. So I want you to kind of take that in and just think about what it is that actually is in your power, because that is where your point of influence is. And here is what those are. It's what you do. You, whether or not you choose to social distance, how you think. Now, you can think, hey, I think you should be social distancing and you're not. That's your thought. That's your prerogative. You're allowed to think it. Just ask yourself, how does this feel? Does it feel secure? Like, does it give you a sense of security to think that? Like, you might think, hey, I think everyone should be social distancing. And it might make you feel secure because you have a belief and you're standing by it. But it also might make you feel anxious if other people aren't. You're thinking, I think you should be social distancing. And you feel anxious because you look around and maybe the people that you want to be doing that aren't. So ask yourself how it makes you feel and if you want to keep thinking it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't continue to choose thinking it, but just know that it's your thought causing the anxiety, not what is or isn't happening. The other thing is you can control what you agree to, even if laws are passed. If a law is passed or a mandate is said, you're not trapped. You're not forced to stay in. It's still your choice. Just there might be more consequences. Yeah, you can still go outside. You can still go to the store, go have an event. You can do all those things. You're not literally incapable of doing them now. It's just now you might get charged with a misdemeanor or whatever. I don't know what the law is for you. But just notice that you still do have control of your actions and what you agree to. Like, we have these social contracts in life where there's these laws out there and we kind of just assume it's what we have to do. But it's just that all of society has kind of chosen or agreed silently on the laws that we have. But it's still an agreement. It's still your choice. There's always the freedom in what you choose to agree to and what you choose to think. Similarly, you can choose what you watch. I bring this up because right now, a lot of us are really glued to the news. We're so focused on the headlines and on the facts because we want to know what's going on. And so, what I'm here to share is I'm not here to say, don't watch the news. But what I'm here to say is think about how you watch the news because you control what you watch and how you watch it. So, what I think can help is to get ahead of it before you start turning the TV on or looking at social media. Ask yourself, okay, what mindset do I want to be in when I turn the TV on? Do I want to be thinking, oh my God, I need to know what the next headline is. I need to know what's going on and feel anxious and turn the TV on from that place? Because if that's what you do, you're only going to feel anxious watching it. Or do you want to think, okay, I'm going to turn the news on and there's going to be some facts and then there's going to be a lot of commentary around those facts. And the facts that the news shares is just going to be the facts that they choose to share. It might only report the deaths, not all of the people still alive, not how that compares to the general day when people die. It's been designed to glue me to it, which often means to only show me the worst of it. Not always the case, but often what it is. So how do I want to take in the news when I watch it? Okay, I want to be informed and I want to just see the data as the data it is and notice just the facts separate from the headlines. From that place, you can feel centered, grounded, matter of fact. When you watch the news from that place, then the way you take it in and the result you have is going to be entirely different. So what you watch and how you watch it is in your control, as are the boundaries that you set. So we talked earlier about how other people might not do what you want them to do in this time, but you can still set boundaries. So for instance, if you're at home with your kids, and you want them to help out more. You want them maybe to do their schoolwork. Maybe they were sent a packet from their teacher at home, and you want them to do it, and they're not. You can still set a boundary for how they show up. You can't make your child do the homework. Like, you can't force them to literally write the answers, but you can say, hey, I'd like you to do your homework now. We've set this up. This is the schedule. It's time to do the homework. And if you don't, you just won't be able to watch Netflix. What that does is it's very matter of fact, and it helps you remember what you can control. And you don't do this to manipulate somebody to do something. You do it for your own back. You do it so that you know you are in charge of your experience and what you can and can't do. You can't control what your child actually does, but you can decide how you want to respond to it. You can let them know. What that means is then if your child doesn't do the homework, you don't have to get upset. If you get upset, it's not because they didn't do their homework, it's because of what you're making that mean, what you're thinking about that. You're thinking they should be listening to me. They should at least do this one thing. They're going to get so behind if they don't. Those thoughts are causing the anxiety. But instead, if you set a boundary and you say, hey, this is it, this is what you can do, this is what I'm requesting for you to do. And if you don't, this is the thing that I will do as a result. It's all about you. So if you're setting boundaries, I gave an example of homework, but it could be in other cases like, hey, so-and-so, I'm not seeing people right now. I'm self-quarantining, but if you come to my house because you want to say hi or you want to hang out, that's fine. You can knock on the door, but I'm not going to answer it. I'm not going to let you in. So they come and they knock and they're pounding on the door. You can stay calm and knowing you're not going to let them in. That's the boundary that you set. That's what you chose to do. And so boundaries can give you back the control that you have. Just remember that the way you set a boundary is you make the request and then you have a consequence if it's not done. But the consequence is about what you will do or what you won't do, not about the other person. Because you can't force the other person to do something. And we set the boundary not to manipulate a behavior in someone else, but to remind ourselves of our control and remind ourselves of our freedom to think and feel what we want in that situation. Okay, so the next tool to share is we can choose our response to anxiety intentionally. So we've talked about this a little bit throughout the rest of this, the previous parts of this webinar. But what I want to do here, and this is the last specific tool that I'll be sharing, what I want to do here is talk about how we tend to respond to anxiety. Because we've talked a lot about how, I'm actually going to go back to the slide. Just a moment. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this. This here, we've talked about the input is the virus, and that's neutral. And we've talked a lot about the thoughts and the physiology behind it and how that creates the anxiety. But what we haven't talked about is what happens once you have the anxiety. And the feelings that we have determine how we act or how we respond. And so what we want to do is we want to know how to intentionally choose our response to anxiety. Because a lot of times you might not catch the anxiety at the level of the thoughts. You might notice it after you're already experiencing it. And so then you have a choice. How do I want to respond now that I'm already feeling anxious? So there's 4 ways we tend to show up. And so I'm going to share what those 4 ways are. The first 3 aren't as helpful. In the short term, they might even feel good, but in the long term, they don't help our anxiety during this pandemic. The last way does. And so we've hinted at this last way throughout, but I want to be really concrete about it in this webinar so that you really see it in a different way. Sometimes if we talk about the same thing from some different angles, the language lands differently and you get different takeaways from it. All right, so the first way we tend to respond to anxiety is we resist it. So, what this can look like is blame. So, it's things like I keep going back to social distancing because it's an easy one I think for us to all know what it means during this time where we've been recommended to stand about 6 feet away from others. And so resisting anxiety could be things like getting angry, getting mad at people for not social distancing, for traveling, for continuing to meet up, blaming them for the spread of the virus. So that resistance, sure, in the moment, you don't feel anxiety, but you do feel anger and frustration and maybe rage even. So that sometimes rage can feel more powerful, or anger could feel more powerful than anxiety. So you feel more in control. So if it's helping you, then go ahead and think it. But often what I find is it just stops us from knowing what really is going on, which is that we're scared or we're anxious. And so when we resist it and we look for a culprit and we blame others, we don't give ourselves the chance to really know what's going on within us because we're so busy looking at others and thinking about what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing or what they're doing wrong that we forget to look at our own minds and our own way of managing ourselves. We want them to be different so that we can feel better. If they would just do these things, then I could feel less anxious. But the only reason you feel anxious is because of what you're thinking. You're thinking they should be behaving in a certain way, but they're going to behave the way they behave. So, how can you allow yourself to be okay with you and with what's going on with you, even when other people aren't doing what you want them to do? Another way resistance can look is it's kind of like positive affirmations, but not believing them. It's where you try to lipstick on a pig, is that expression, where you take a situation that you think is bad and you try to positive think your way about it. You just try to think, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. This terrible situation will be fine. And positive affirmations don't work when you're so far away from believing that thought. If you really don't believe it's going to be fine, then don't try to force yourself to think it. Think a thought that feels actually a little bit better to you. That's going to be what allows you to experience it. So it might be, I don't feel like things are fine, and that's okay. That's just my experience right now. It's okay that I'm thinking things aren't okay. That takes the resistance out and allows you to allow it. Okay, the second way we tend to respond that isn't helpful is we hide from it. What this tends to look like is we emotionally eat. So we start snacking, we start drinking, or we avoid the news. Not when we avoid the news, it's not always because we're trying to hide from anxiety. Similarly with when we eat chips or have a drink. So the behavior itself doesn't mean you're hiding from anxiety, but think about why you're doing that behavior. Are you eating because you're hungry or because you feel uncomfortable and you don't know what else to do? Like you're bored, or you just think, I deserve some fun and this is the only fun I can have. So you start to eat, or because you're feeling anxious and so you don't know what to do with it, but you do know how to eat. And so you grab the food. Those little comforts, like comfort foods, we even have an expression for this. It's a way to hide from the feeling. And in the moment, it might feel good to comfort eat. But in the long run, what it does is it just blunts you from feeling your feelings. So the anxiety doesn't go away. It's still there. You just hit pause for a moment and then you have to get back to it after you finish eating. So then you might turn to another activity where you watch TV so you don't have to feel. So just think about the reason behind the behavior you're doing. If you don't watch the news because you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to know what's going on, and you're feeling so anxious, so you just like hide from it, you're hiding from anxiety. And that doesn't always have to mean it's a bad thing, but just know your reason and decide if you like it. So it could look like, I know when I watch the news, I tend to think worst case scenario. So I'm only going to watch the news 5 minutes a day, and that's it. And that's what I'm going to do. And when I go to watch the news, I'm going to plan ahead of time that I might feel anxious because of what I'm thinking, not because what's happening. And you set yourself up that way. That's very different than avoiding every piece of data because you're afraid of what it'll mean for you. The next way we tend to respond is we really react to it. If you're somebody who experiences panic attacks, or a lot of people that I've been coaching, it's been around their mind is racing at night in a way it never used to. And they have this like mild anxiety underneath it that can kind of turn to panic at night, like panicky thoughts that are spinning in their head. It doesn't have to be at night, but a lot of the people I've been coaching, it's been at night. And so it's this panic or this feeling of paranoia. And what that is you experience anxiety. And so you feel the anxiety and you notice the anxiety in you. And then you think, oh no, I'm anxious. Something must be going wrong. And you make the anxiety mean something is going wrong. But anxiety is just that feeling, that vibration in you. It doesn't mean anything. All it is a chemical response in your body. We can make it mean, oh, I was thinking something that caused this. Or we can make it mean something's gone terribly wrong. But when we make it mean something's gone terribly wrong, we heighten the anxiety and we make it worse. And then our brain, it's a natural problem solver. So it was designed to solve problems. Our brain goes, got it, chief, something's gone terribly wrong. Let me find all the evidence for how that's true. So it pinpoints and looks for all of the reasons that things are wrong. It only sees that data, not because that's the only data out there, but because you've told it to look for that, because you're thinking something's gone wrong because you feel anxious. And so when we react in that way, we stop ourselves from seeing all the things that are going right and how everything could be okay. It might be that things are all right. It might be that at least some things that you can see could be fine. So that's what happens when we react. So the last way to respond, and this is the way that we've been hinting at throughout this whole webinar, and the way that I find to be most helpful, is we want to understand the anxiety. And that's what we've been talking about throughout. It's knowing that the anxiety is just that feeling and processing it in your body. So what that is that breathe technique we talked about at the beginning. And it's describing what it feels like in your body, but also all of the feelings you're experiencing in your body, like physically experiencing. So if you're in the middle of anxiety, this is what your self-talk could sound like. Okay, this is anxiety, high anxiety. It's just vibrations in my body. This is what it feels like. Beat of the heart, tingling fingers, heat of the cheeks. But I'm also experiencing my chest expanding. I'm hearing the birds outside. I'm feeling the wind in my house from the air conditioning on my face. I'm a nice temperature. I have the ground beneath me. Like you're physically describing the experience of the anxiety and everything. So the physical sensation. You understand it at that level, the physical level. Then you go, okay, it's just from what I'm thinking. I was thinking thoughts that caused this. The pandemic is the pandemic. I get to choose what I think about it. It could be that this is the next step to the world's healing. It could be that this is a situation that's going to make me so much stronger. It could be that this is my opportunity to look inward and decide how I want to show up in this moment. It could be this is the ultimate experience for me to practice managing my anxiety. There's so many ways you can think about it. The situation itself is neutral. It's your thoughts that cause the feeling. So understand what those thoughts are so you can then choose how you want to feel instead. Because bottom line, that anxiety is optional. It doesn't mean I'm saying don't choose it. What I am saying though is decide intentionally to choose it if you want to, by intentionally deciding how you want to think about it. There's no way you're supposed to think about this. There's no moral, ethical, right way. Like I was coaching someone the other day who was saying that she felt guilty because she was thinking about how lucky she was, as if her feeling bad about it, like as if she could feel bad enough to make somebody else feel better. But you feeling guilty only affects you and it doesn't help anyone. And when you're feeling guilty, sometimes you isolate yourself. Sometimes the things that you do from that guilt doesn't really help you and doesn't help others the way you're wanting to. So just think about how you want to take this experience in, because it's yours to make mean whatever you want it to mean. And if you want some more help with this, let me know. Email me. I'm a life coach. I'm here to help. If you have questions, if you have thoughts that aren't serving you, if you want to talk about this more, if you want more support, just go ahead and email me. I'm happy to do some email coaching back and forth. If you're wanting to do some type of package or longer thing, I'm happy to offer a special uh, rate for that given the time. But if you just have a single question or anything like that, I want to help. I'm here to help and to support. So send me that note and I am ready to help support you in that. And just know nothing's gone wrong. You can feel your feelings. No feeling is ever going to kill you. It's just a vibration and it's optional. All right. Thank you so much for your time, for joining me on this Saturday. I will be sending out this replay in the coming week, so you will have it to access. And again, feel free to email me for any questions that you might have about what we talked about or some coaching questions to get some support through email or through sessions. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And please just know the anxiety, it's your choice. You get to decide. So just let yourself know that it is yours. It's optional. And there's nothing wrong with feeling what you're feeling. Thank you so much. Bye.